So this is the very blank empty screen. And as you know, in the UX design process, you first have some sort of wireframes. You draw them, you sketch them, whatever, and then you translate these wireframes into the prototype that we're seeing right now. Okay, so we're gonna click on T from the top and we add our text. We're gonna write register, which is the main registration page. We're gonna change the font size from the right. So the right side is basically how you design the elements. So we're gonna, from text, change it to 30 for now. I like to use Poppins. Poppins is a very nice font for modern interfaces. But make sure that before you get started, you have your branding guidelines cleared. So you have the fonts that you're gonna be using, the colors, the font sizes, because obviously if you're gonna have multiple headings on different screens, you don't want the fonts to be inconsistent. You want to have them consistent across all of the screens. So for headers, we're gonna be using Poppins and we'll make it bold, so you can change the font weight from here. We're gonna make it a little bit bigger, so perhaps 40, and this is fine. Actually 35 will look nicer. And this is basically the text that will appear at the top of every screen. So a very nice trick to not keep repeating yourself over and over while you're designing is to set default text types and colors. So from here, if I click on these four dots, I can actually create a style that every time I choose it, what I'm seeing right now will be imported, whether it is the font size or the colors or whatever. So if I click on create style and I name it page header, every time I want to add a new page header, I go to text, I click on it, and then it changes to the way I want. So this will make your work in Figma way faster, and you will not have to keep changing the font size and colors and so on. So once we have our title here, we're gonna start with designing the input fields. So for the input field for now, we're gonna be displaying on the first screen the name, the email, and we can ask for the gender as well. It's really up to you. But the reason why I'm choosing these different input fields is because the gender will be a drop down, or the country, or whatever you want. The name will be a text field, and then we're gonna be going over the username and password, and you're gonna see how different they are. So let's start with putting our first element. So from shapes, you click on it, and then you basically draw a shape. And for now, we're gonna make it like that. The best colors for as a background for a shape, I usually use F5. It's a very nice light gray, and it merges well with the white background. And of course, we need to add a little bit of border radius. So from the top, as you can see here, we have corner radius. We change it to 10. And as you can see, now we have an input field. So obviously we need a label. And one of the things that we talked about before, labels and where do you place them. So if the form is short, you have no problem with putting it inside as a placeholder. So let's say if we're gonna write name, we can write it inside of the input. But if it's a very long form, then it's better not to put it inside, as we talked about before, for usability purposes. But for now, we're gonna put the input or the placeholder inside. So we will need text. And we're gonna add a text here, and we're gonna name. Obviously, that's not what we need, so we're gonna make it maybe 16, not bold. We're gonna make it medium. And it's very important that you make sure that the color contrast in your input fields and in your form, it makes a huge difference, because if you saw a form like this, it will not look as nice as if you just take it a little bit further to the same color as the background, and this will look way neater. So one thing to do, and honestly, I see a lot of people not caring about this specific thing in Figma. Make sure that you group your elements. So we have a rectangle where we're gonna name it input, register, which is the page title, and the name, which is the placeholder or a label. So this is basically the first part, and I'm gonna group them together by selecting them, right click, and then group selection. So this way, I know that this is the name field. And if I check what's under it, I have the label and the input. If I want to duplicate and create another one, I can just simply take the whole name field and duplicate it this way. What's really interesting about grouping is that you can just take whichever group from whichever screen and then copy it into any other screens, and it will take the entire subsets with it. So the second one, we probably ask for date of birth or whatever, so name, let's say email for now. And then we have this email. We're gonna name it to make it organized, email field. So now you can see on the left we have page title, name, and field. I personally like to keep the hierarchy as I'm seeing it on the prototype. So we have the page title, we have the header at the top, then the name, then the email. This way you make your work quite organized. Let's do one more, which is, let's say, gender. And now we have 3 input fields on our registration screen. Now, we want obviously a button as well. And I'm not going to do all of the fields on one screen because I won't show you how you connect screens together and how we're going to apply some of the UX things that we've learned before here. So we need a button, so I'm going to add a rectangle. And with buttons, you need to make them clear that this is a clickable button. So we're going to use a different color. Depends on your project and on what kind of branding you're using. But this is a nice color to get started with. The border radius, you can change it to make it look like a button. And I like to add drop shadows to the buttons because it gives them this kind of nice look and feel. Now, most people will put the button here, right? And this is one of the things that we talked about. If you're using a mobile phone, most likely you're going to be holding it this way. So your finger wants to be able to click on the button easily. So if you put it here, that's not a very wise thing to do. It's highly recommended that you always keep it close to the user. And obviously, if you have more fields, the screen will look even more complete. But having an uncluttered screen is better than having a screen that's cluttered and the button is not reachable with just a single grip. So we definitely need a label on this button. And I'm sorry if you already know all of that, but we're going to get into the more advanced stuff in a bit. This is just laying the foundation and shaping the page, basically. So we're going to change. Let's not copy. Let's add it here to make everything organized. I would say register, but because we're going to have multiple steps, I'll call it next for now. So you're going to go over 3 steps in order to register your account. So we need it 18 probably, and definitely because it's a button, you will need it to be more visible. We're going to change the color to white. And these guys that you're seeing right now, they're quite helpful. So you can see that it's in the middle of the screen, and it's not aligned in the center, or if, for example, you were just designing different elements, you want to make sure that the whole grid is aligned together. So we have our button here, and so far this is what we have. And if I run it, you'll see that it's just a non-functional prototype. Now going back, before moving to the next step, I want to require the user to agree on the terms of conditions, for example. So I will add a small rectangle, but before that, let me make sure that this is all organized. Next button, and I'll call it button. I'll call this label. Then I'll group them together, and I will name it next. And again, make sure that the whole hierarchy makes sense. And this is gender. And this all now makes sense. We have to, okay, cool. Now, in order to add the checkbox, I'm gonna add a rectangle. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. And this is where it gets interesting. I'm gonna make it white, I'm gonna add a stroke, and I'm gonna make the border a little bit, not that much, maybe 4, there you go. And I'm gonna add a text next to it that says agree to our terms and conditions, for example. And we'll make it centered like this. So this will basically act as a checkbox in a second. So if I again run it and I click on the checkbox, obviously nothing will happen. But this is where variables come handy. So how do you create multiple versions of an element so that every time you copy it or you use it again, you don't have to create all of these different versions of this element? So this checkbox, for example, I want it to be checked and I want it to be unchecked, right? And at the moment, the design I'm seeing right now is just a design for an unchecked checkbox. So how do you turn it into, let's say, element that has multiple versions? All you have to do is click on Command, Option, and K. This will turn it into something called component. And by component, I mean something that you can keep reusing. And this component will have something called variables. So just as variables in programming, they keep changing. Each variable has different parameters, and you will see that in a second. So once we turn it into component, you'll see that it's now purple. And on the right, we have something called variance. So we click on plus, and this weird thing will appear on your screen. Personally, I don't like to work on my components on my screen, so I'll try to just drag them outside. One sec. Like here. So that I can work on them, and then at the end, I'll just take the component and I'll just place it on the screen. So at the moment, as you can see on the left, once we turned it into a component, the default one is now named default, and there's a new variant called variant 2. So what is this exactly? So the default is basically what we created, and the variant is a copy of it, and we can actually customize it to how we want it to be, and then attach it into a variable. So let's say before it's checked, it looks this way, but once it's checked, I want it to appear checked. So I'm gonna add another rectangle inside. I'm gonna add border radius. Let me adjust it a little bit. And I'm gonna color it something darker. So now we have a checkbox basically that you can display to your users once they check it. How do you do that? On the left, we have default and we have variant. So if you double click on it, you'll see something called property equals default. So this is like parameters in programming, right? So I don't want to call my parameter property. I want to call it state. Is it checked or unchecked? So I'm going to call it state, and equals, I'm going to say this is the unchecked one. Then I double click on the other one, and again, you should name the property exactly the same, state, but this one is checked. Now on the right, you will notice that we have two versions now, checked and unchecked. And what's super cool is that if I go to assets, now I can reuse this on every single screen of my prototype. So if I just carry it this way, now on the right, I can choose between the modes, whether it's checked or unchecked. Now the user did not check anything yet, but this is just for you. For example, if you have multiple versions of this element and you want to keep switching between the versions easily, you just change it from the right. Is it clear? Cool. Now, how do you have the user click on it? How do you have the user switch between it's checked and unchecked? So from the left, we're gonna move to the prototype mode, and from here, we're gonna link this element with this element within the same component. And you're gonna see the interaction box will appear here. And on tap, and this is what we want for now, on tap, once it's clicked, we need it to be changed to this one. And again, if it was checked and then it was tapped again, we want it to be unchecked. So let's try it. We're gonna run. That's the default. The default, make sure that it's always unchecked or is the default state. Let's try it again. Now if I click on it, it changes. This really makes the prototype way more interactive, and the user will feel that they're actually using a real app rather than just have elements here and there and telling the user like, hey, just pretend as it's a checkbox. So this is the very first part, which is how to create variables and how to also create components. And components are something that you should be using every single time, because as you can see, we're investing a lot of time creating these input fields, even this button and this checkbox. But next time I don't have to do that because I already have them created. So let's say now if I want the user, once they hover on the button, I want its color to change. So what do we do here? We just select the element, and again, Command Option K, turned into component. We want to go and create a variant. We have two different versions, one that's without any hovering and one with hovering. So once we click on plus, this turns into a component. Again, you can carry the whole thing outside the canvas and then work on it separately. So we have next here, and we have the two variables basically. That's the default and that's the variant too. So we chose state as the property name for the first one. For this one, because we're just changing the color, we're just gonna name it color. And this is the default. And then color, let's say on hover. And it's really up to you what you name your variables, because this is just for you to know what each element is about. So now we have on hover and default. If you go to the top component, you'll be able to see that under color we have default and on hover. And you can actually keep creating more and more and more properties and more variants. So you can basically switch between colors and sizes just with a click of a button. But for this one, on hover, we're gonna change its color, let's say to something darker, like this, so that once I put my mouse on it, it changes. So how do we link it? Again, we go to the prototype mode and then we just link it like that. And you can actually add some sort of animation to make it look nicer, not just a sudden change. You can make it dissolve. We're going to talk about Smart Animate in a bit, but you can make it dissolve and you can change how long do you want the dissolve effect to last. So you don't really have to worry much about this part, but you can change from 300 milliseconds to 400, 500. The more you add, the longer it takes to dissolve. So as you can see, it's no longer on the screen. So I'm going to go to assets and I'm going to drag it here and drop it here. And as you can see, now we have our button back. And now every time I have a screen, I can just keep adding buttons as much as I want. And each one of them will have two versions, default and on hover. So if I play and I run my prototype, I can check. Once basically I did something wrong. Here, once we go to prototype, we don't want it on tap. We want it while hovering. This is very essential because every single action will basically act differently. So on tap means on click, while hovering means while you're hovering on it. So once I click on play again, and then I hover over the button, as you can see, it dissolves in a very nice way. And I can still check the checkbox. Cool. Okay. Now, one thing that we've learned, and I'm gonna ask you now, while you're creating or designing forms or a certain process that has many screens, what is that one thing that you should always have? If you're designing, let's say, multiple screens for a process, and you want to let the user know what's coming next, if you remember. We talked about progress indicators. Do you remember? Where we have these numbers and each number basically represents which stage you are in right now, so that the user always know that I have 2 more steps to go and I'm currently on the current step. So to make the screen a little bit nicer and to teach you something else, we're gonna add a progress indicator. So we're gonna move all of these, and if we go to layers, we're gonna move all of these here, and we're gonna add the progress indicator. And it's really up to you how you want to design it, but usually it's just circles, and in each circle there's a number. Make sure that the circles they're equal, so 30, 30, and that's very useful. Like you can change the exact size on the right. And then from the fill, well, F5 is really like the neatest color, so I'm going to reuse it again. Maybe make them a little bit bigger. So if you hold shift and then you resize, you're resizing equally from the height and width as well. So 35. I'm going to replicate it twice. And now it tells you that the space is equal between them. So I'm going to carry the whole thing. I'm going to place it in the middle. And I'm going to add a line. I'm going to also make it F5 so that it merges nicely with the shapes. And I'm going to replicate it again over here. Now this is a shape, right? I don't really have to name every single one, like this is a circle, this is a line, but at least I need to group all of them and name this progress indicator. Because if you're designing multiple screens for an entire app, definitely you will be reusing these elements. And if you want to not save them as a group or as a component, you will need to keep creating them every single time. So now we have it here. And as you can see, this is empty. So I'm going to add some text. The numbers, 1. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to change the weight into maybe semi-bold to look nicer. Then the second number, and the third number. Now, obviously, on every single screen, we want the progress bar to move. So how do you do that? Who has an idea? Based on what we just said. So we have this progress bar, and every single time when we go to a different screen, we want the progress bar to change. What do you do?
Add it on tap to the submit button.
Sorry?
Add it on tap thing to the submit button so that it can change.
Right, but how would it change? Because like how would we, for example, make one colored once we're on the second screen, and so on, without having to recreate the elements? We need to reuse it over and over, so we're going to create another variable for every single state. So again, to do that, Command Option K is now a component. We added a new variable, and again, I like to work with my components here. So we have this new version. So this is the default. It's empty. There's no step has been taken yet. So this is variant 2, and I'm going to call it actually step. So this is the first step. This is step 0. And then I'm going to add actually 2 more. But before you do that, and make sure that because sometimes you will not know what's happening with your layers, but it's actually, you will need to first expand the component, because anything that's outside the component will not be considered inside as part of what you're doing. So we have now the third one. And I'm gonna duplicate it one last time. Or actually, let's start step by step, because we will need the modifications we're gonna be using now. So first means the first step. So I'm gonna change the color of this, and I'm gonna use the same exact blue to make the screen nice, consistent colors. I'm gonna change this to white, and the line, I'm gonna keep it as it is because we're still not in part 2. Okay, so this is the first variant. I'm gonna copy this. Okay, first 0, so we're gonna copy this, we're gonna name it step equals second. If you name it something else, if you name the parameter something else, it will not work. So I'm gonna copy it here, and I'm gonna color this blue, and I'm also gonna color this as well, which represents that we're now in the second step. Cool, so one last element to add. So 0, 1, 2, and the last one is this, which is 3. And that's why I said don't just copy all of them at once, because as you can see, we're reusing the customizations that we're doing. So blue, and as you see, it's done. Okay, now we have 3 versions of the progress indicator, and each one is named 1, 2, 3, first, second, third, not 3, that doesn't make sense. Third, and basically now we can switch between all of them. If we go to assets, then to components, we can re-import our progress indicator, and on the right you can see that you can switch between each one of them, right? Now we will go to the second screen and see how it works. So how do you create a new screen? You just simply copy the whole thing, the whole frame. I'm gonna name this register part 1. And I'm really investing time now into renaming and showing you how you should basically order your frames, because it's really important. And if you're going to work with a company and you're the UX designer, these kind of things matter, because you're not the only person who's going to be working on these screens, and some other people will want to check them out. And basically how it works in real life, these Figma prototypes, they get exported as Figma file, and it gets sent to the developers for them to take it and then convert it into a usable app or website or whatever. So you want to make sure that everything is neat, everything is saved under components. You're not just throwing elements here and there, just like how you do with your programming libraries and classes. Okay, so this is the very first screen. We're gonna copy paste. We have a second screen now. Of course, here we want it to change, so we just simply click on it and we change to second. This way, once the user goes to the second screen, this will show that you're now on the second step. Now before we actually continue working on the second screen, let me show you how you make drop downs interactive. And this is I believe one of the most interesting parts about this session, which is how to create drop downs. So usually once you click on a drop down, it shows you multiple options, and then once you click on it, the label here will change based on your selection. So let's create the drop down list. So we're going to create a rectangle, or before actually let's turn it into a component, obviously, because we will need different versions of it. And then we're going to add a new variant. I'm going to take the whole thing here. I'm going to expand the canvas. Okay, now I'm going to add the drop down that will appear once the user clicks on the Gentor input. So we're going to make it slightly darker than F5. And this really isn't the best way of designing your file. You'll need to have your color codes ready. You will need to know exactly what you're designing. It's not just guessing and choosing random colors. So we're going to add some border radius here. And now we're going to add the options. So I'm going to add just a very simple line in between, just to separate the options. So again, F5, F5, oops. I'm going to make it slightly darker. One sec. Okay, I'm actually gonna take it, copy it. So this is one of the things. So if your element is not displaying because there's something else that's over it, you can do something called bring to front. This means that we're gonna bring it in front of all of the elements that's actually displaying on. So let's remove this and let's just simply adjust this. So we're not gonna make it too dark, but we're gonna make it a little bit darker so we can separate the elements. I'm gonna bring it here. And now we're just gonna put two options for now, male, female, just this is annoying. Okay, and female. Okay, so now we have our drop down. It's ready. Now how do you connect it? That's what's important. But before we do that, let's make sure that it's all under the variant. So we have this whole thing. Let's make sure that we group it with text. So this is what will happen if you don't group. Look how we have different elements, these at the top, and we have the actual box here. It doesn't make sense. So I'm just gonna copy this here, group the entire thing together, and drop down. And then this has to go under the second variant, which is here. So as you can see, this is the second variant and it has the label, the input, and the drop down. Now, basically, if the user clicks on male, I want the actual input to change with a placeholder male. If they click on female, I want it to change with a placeholder female. So we basically need, how do we do this with variants?
You have two more nodes, one with the gender bit saying male.
Exactly, exactly. So basically, we just need to copy this again. We have a third variant. And actually, I'm not really renaming them just yet, because I just want to make sure that they're all designed well. So male. And usually, because you want the user to know that it has been selected, you will go with a darker color. But I will leave this to your UI skills. And then we're going to copy this one last time, and we're going to name this female. Okay, so what we have here, we have the default. What we're going to name it, I mean, we can name it gender, to be honest. So this is the default. This is gender equal male, gender equal female, and this is gender select, whatever you want to call it. So now, before we move and we place it on the screen, that's the interesting part. We go to prototype, and we want to make sure that once this is selected, this shows. And usually, you want to show the user that there's an actual selection here. So you go to a website called Flat Icon. Just search for an arrow. So let's take this one, you PNG. It's fine. You download it. You go back here, and then you drop it here. And then you just simply add it to your elements. And if it's too dark or the contrast is not working well, you can just change the opacity from here, from layer. You can make like 70, it will make slightly better. Okay, so this way the user is expecting a drop down, but we just need to copy this again here and here, and now we're ready. Now when we go to prototype, we want to make sure that once the user clicks on this drop down appears. And you don't have to select this because this is actually part of this variant. But once they click on male, we want to make sure that it changes into this. And once they click on female, we want to make sure that it changes into this. However, if they clicked on any of those, we want to give them the option to reselect. So we're gonna also do a link from this one to here, and another one from here to here. Does this make sense? Yeah? Cool. So now if you go back to our screen, to assets, we have gender here. We're gonna add it, and it actually looks way nicer with the arrow because we can see there's actually a drop down. And let's run it and see how it works. So I clicked on it, the drop down appeared. I click on male, male change. I click on it again, female, and as you can see, smooth, very nice. And it really gives this realistic testing experience with the user because they are able to select, they can see things moving while they're hovering, and they can select from the drop down menu as well. Simple as that. Now let's link our screen with this button to the next screen. And here we're gonna do something else. So let's just choose username and password. And the last screen will be just you have successfully created your account. So username. I go back here. Obviously you will need to keep renaming. So this is not a name field, this is your username field as well here. So I'll leave this to you, but you now know that you need to keep renaming and organizing all of your files and elements. So username, this is, let's say this is password, because we can actually also do something really interesting with passwords. I'm gonna show you now, and let's remove gender. Usually when you're creating an account, there's this option where you click on the eye to see the password, then you click on it again to see these like stars. So that's what we're gonna be doing. But first I need the eye icon. So I just go to flat icon. And if you get the premium version, by the way, you will be able to customize the fonts and such. The icons. So we need an eye icon. So let's say this one. We'll download it. We go back here and then we add it to the not this one. Then we add it to the password. So while I'm holding shift, as you can see, it's easy to resize elements, and it's too sharp, so I'm gonna make it 70% because it just will merge, or 50% will merge nicely with the interface. Okay, so now we're ready to make this more interesting. So I'm gonna turn it into a variant. But first, make sure that all of the elements are within what you're highlighting. So as you can see, I should take this and put it here. And this is not the email field, this is the password field. Imagine having so many elements and you don't even know where's your element because you did not invest enough time renaming and organizing them. So we have them here now. We're gonna select it, Control Option K, and then from the variants, again plus, and then I'm just showing you how I usually work. This is my process in creating them. You might have other ways of creating variants, but this is basically how I found is the fastest way. So we have the default, we have variant 2. So let's say, to make it even more interactive, not just drop downs and checkboxes and buttons are interactive, we want also text boxes, input fields to be interactive. So unfortunately, Figma does not have the option to type, but we can do a simple trick that will make the user feel that they're actually using a real application. So once you click on password, what is the first thing that appears? Let's say, you know, like this line, and it's waiting for you to enter something. So let's do that as the first variant. So we're gonna name it here. Let's name it state default, then state equals typing. And we're gonna actually remove this. We're gonna add a simple line here. And we're gonna increase maybe the stroke to 2. And we're gonna put it right here. And this will look like it's typing. Okay, so this is the first one. We need one for once the password is typed. So we will create another one. And by the way, you can create one by copying and pasting the variants, or by going to the component and then you click on variants, then add new variant. I just like to copy and paste because I'm used to this way. So copy, paste. Then again, if I put it outside, it will not be part of the component. So I need to first expand it. Now I copy it here, and I'm gonna name it I don't know, pass. Okay, now I'm just gonna take this text from here and put it into here. And let's just put like lines, or like stars for now. This will show that it's a password. But what if the user clicks on the eye icon and they want to see the password? And that's what we're gonna be doing. So we're gonna create one last variant. Copy, paste. And let's name it show pass. Okay, it really doesn't matter, but here, and we're gonna rename it to GDSC123. Don't use that password, but yeah. Okay. So as you can see, now we have these 4 variants, and now we need to link them in a way to make them interactive for the user. So what do we do? If the user clicks on password on the actual thing, from prototype, we want it to display this element. Now, once you click on tap, you will see that we have different options. There is something called after delay if you want to show it after a certain period of time, but this is really not necessary. But there is something called key gamepad, what we will be using right now and on tap. I'm going to leave it on tap. This is going to show. And then once this screen appears, we want to tell the user every time there's an input field, make sure you click on space or K or enter or whatever for them to know that here where they input something. So I'm going to link this to this screen, and I'm going to change it to key gamepad. This means that whenever this key is clicked, then show this screen. And of course, in your UX design, usability testing with your user, you give them the instructions that whenever you see an input type, you press space, for example. Now this will appear, but what if the user wants to show the password, display it instead of having these hash stars? So we're just gonna link the actual icon to this screen. And what if they want to go back again? So I'm gonna give them a feedback. And this again goes back to what we were discussing about the past weeks. We want to slightly change it just for them to know that this has been clicked, right? So let's make it 20. So now, well, ideally it should be the opposite. It should be faded. Once you click it, it becomes darker, but let's keep it like that. Let's go back to prototype, and then if you click on this again, I want this to appear. Okay, we're done. Now we need to go back to assets. Then we bring the password here, and it looks nice. So let's start the prototype from the beginning. And of course, what I just applied, you can apply for the name, the email, and the rest of the text fields. So I will select mail, I go to here, I check next, and as you can see, the progress bar changed in a very nice way. Now, if I click on password, it's gonna show me this thingy. If I click on space, it will show the password. If I click on the eye icon, it's gonna show the password. I click on it again, and it's gonna hide it. Look how nice. So neat, smooth, and yeah, quite interactive. And as you can see, the eye icon color changes once I click on it and once I disable it. So yeah, this is what we have so far. Let's create our final screen. I'm gonna move this here. I usually like to put them under each other. Just leave them here for now. Obviously, we don't want the agree anymore, so we're going to remove it. And we're going to replicate the last screen. So we have register part 1, and this is all register part 2. Okay. And what you're seeing here at the top, that's all the components that we created. So if you actually collapse all of them down, you'll see how neat the interface are. So we have all of our components in purple, and we have our pages here. And this way you'll make work organized. So we're gonna copy this, paste. This is the last screen. And as you can see, it automatically changed it to part 3. I don't have to do it anymore. And this will change to, from design, from progress indicator, we change it to 3rd because we're on the 3rd step. And let's give the user a message that their account has been created, let's say. So we're just gonna add a text. Your account is being created, or whatever. You can get creative with the messages and the feedback that you show your user. 18, let's make it a little bit darker. And because this is the last screen, I'm gonna not remove the button, I'm gonna reuse it. I'm gonna put it here because it's nice. And let's make it, for example, well, actually, please check your email for the verification code. This is, I'm taking it way too seriously, but yeah, I'm just gonna change it to resend code, for example, just to for it to make sense, right? This is not very nice. You need to change the line height a little bit. So yeah, okay. So now, if we go to prototype and we connect this, we should be all good to go. So let's try the prototype one last time. Actually, not one last time, but let's try it as a complete journey. So you can replicate what we did to the password here. Then you do the drop down, you select the checkbox next, the password, type it, I can see it. The next, your account has been created, right? There is one thing that's missing, that a very major component that we're missing right here. And from this journey, what is it? Back button, exactly. So because you will need to always give the user the option to go back. You don't want them to feel like they just reached a screen where they need to go and close the application and open it again for them to reach the previous step. So let's right arrow, and we need a back button here, or icon. Let's go with this one. And see, this is why the UX designer should also have some UI skills, because you might be connecting all of these things and you know how to design the most usable interface. But if you don't design it in a nice way, it will not look as good. However, there are some teams where they have UX designers and they have UI designers and they work hand in hand. So yeah, but definitely now companies, they try to cut down the cost and look for someone that has both skills. So we're just gonna add the back button or icon again here. And I'm gonna paste it here, and well, definitely you will not need it here unless there is like a previous screen, like the main screen. So we will need it definitely here and here. I'm not sure why would you need it if your account has been created, but for the sake of it, let's just add it. And once anyone clicks on this, they'll need to go back to the previous screen, and if anyone clicks on this, they need to go back to this screen. So let's try our prototype one last time. And it looks good. Like for a prototype that we've just created, it's actually neat, because if you consider these details, it actually makes a difference. Like the drop shadow, like on the button, the on hover thingy, the progress bar, the font types that you're using, the contrast between the placeholder and the background. These kind of things are very important. So if I click on gender, I can choose between both of them. As you can see, I can keep on switching as much as I want. I can check. I can also go to the next screen. The progress bar has changed. I have a back now. I can actually go back. I can click on the password. It will change this way. I can click on space. It will show a password. I click on the eye icon and it will show me the password, as you can see. I click on next and then it's all good. Whew. That's it. All right, so the very first thing that we have here, so this is just like a template that I'm using to demonstrate these plugins. So it's a very basic template, and because the first two sessions, they were mainly a mobile prototype, this time I was like, why don't we do a web version this time? So as you can see, we have this very basic header and this slider as well. We're not going to be designing it in a way that is final. I'm just going to demonstrate the plugins and how we can use these plugins to make this look better. So the very first plugin is called Unsplash. So if you remember last time, in order to download an image, we needed to go to unsplash.com or Pixabay, one of these websites that provide you with royalty-free images. We needed to download them, then import them to Figma. And to be honest, if you're building a website with a lot of images, this takes a lot of time. So you can simply go to Unsplash profile on Figma.com community and install it. And once you install it, the really cool thing about Figma, you can install it and you won't have to refresh the page. You can just click on this icon here, go to plugins, and you can see all of the plugins that you have there. So Unsplash is a great tool. In order to import any image, of course, we need first a canvas. So let's perhaps choose a rectangle. You can use any of the other shapes. I am going to put it right there. And then you just select your canvas or your shape, and then you go to plugins, and then you click on Unsplash, right? Once this opens, now you have various categories you can choose from. So there are ready categories, or you can search as well. So let's say you're looking for like a human or someone like to, this is very vague. You might want to be like a little bit more specific. But for example, let's choose this one. And with a simple click, you have it now on your prototype. Like easy, it doesn't take time at all. In comparison, if I want to put the same thing on my prototype, I have to go to Unsplash, search for the image, download it, and import it. What's really cool is that it works with all shapes, so you can import a circle and it will work the same way. And once you have it here, you can just simply resize it and do whatever you want with the image. So that's the first tool, and it doesn't just work with shapes. You can also use it for like backgrounds. So if we want to remove this clean design and have a background or wallpaper for our website, we highlight the entire canvas here. Then we apply the exact same thing. We go to Unsplash, and one of the cool features, like if I'm too bothered, to be honest, to select an image, I can click on Insert Random, or I can click on Abstract, and it will just give me any abstract image here. So it's really cool. It's an interesting tool, but of course, if you're putting an image like that, make sure that you put an overlay so that the text will be visible. This is not very UX friendly, so make sure that if you're using images with a lot of contrast and a lot of things happening in the background, you put an overlay with some opacity so that it looks neater. So that's the very first plugin. It's called Unsplash. I highly recommend you use it. The second plugin is called Feather Icons. So last time we had to go to flat icon, and if you remember, we wanted these icons like the back icon, the arrow, and all of these icons that we will need in our prototype. Again, it's really time consuming. You'll have to go to every website, search for the icons, download them, then import them. This plugin saves a lot of time. So let's say we want to have a button. So I'm just going to copy this button. And let's say we want to have it here, but I don't want to just have like a gesture. I want to have like an arrow to show that this is an actual button. So I go to, again, to my plugins. I click on feather icons, and it will show you a library of so many icons that you can use. So if you want an arrow, for example, you have so many of those. You can just simply choose your favorite and import this easily. So of course you'll need to adjust the size and so on, but let's say let's adjust it like that. And I have my icon here. And what's so cool about it is that it gets imported as SVG. So it's not PNG or JPEG. So you can simply resize it without pixelating the icon. You can also change the color of the icon, and you can just get creative with your placement. So yeah, this is the second icon, and an alternative plugin to feather icons would be icons 8. So they have more icons there, and feel free to browse other plugins that might provide the same functionality. So the third plugin that we have is lorem ipsum. So if you're gonna prototype, who knows about lorem ipsum? Everyone, yeah? So if you're gonna build a prototype for a project and you don't have time to keep going online and copying this lorem ipsum text, the sample text, the dummy text, or you don't want to invest a lot of time coming up with text that is relevant to the project, you can just simply do the following. So I'm gonna move this button here. I'm just gonna copy some text from here. Of course you can create it from there, but I'm just gonna do it because it's faster. So let's change the color to, okay. So now we have this text, and let's say I don't want to have random text. I just want to have lorem ipsum to show that this is a text placeholder. So I just select the text canvas. I go to the icon here. I click on plugins. I click on lorem ipsum, and then it will show you how many sentences do you want to fill this text. So is it 5? Is it 6, 7 sentences? You can also choose paragraphs if it's a long placeholder, and you click on generate, and there we go. You have your text there, and it's that simple. So this is the third plugin that's quite useful. Now the fourth plugin is called blobs. This is really one of these plugins that can turn your design from an okay design to a really nice design. If you remember the photo that we just imported on the slider, it was okay because it was just like a square and it looked kind of odd. But look how interesting this plugin is. So if you click on blobs from the plugins, it will pop up this small box, and you can create these shapes that you can use as image placeholders, or maybe just to make your design more and more unique. So you can choose the complexity from here, and you can choose the uniqueness, and it changes accordingly. So let's say I want something rounded like this. I insert it. Then, because it's an SVG, you can also, because it's a vector file, you can resize it, and I can put it right here, and then simply I can go to Unsplash, and this is how plugins now work together, and they complement each other's features. So I click on Unsplash, and then I just choose any image. So again, let's choose the same image so that you can compare how different the design is now. Oops. So first you'll need to click on the canvas, of course, then click on, and look how neat this is. So it's really one of these plugins that you can get really creative with, because there are so many shapes that you can generate from blobs, and you can just simply keep changing shapes. And imagine if you have this website where you can even use one of these shapes actually as like a background for your sections. So you can even adjust the shape and get creative with it. But again, I highly recommend that you use it, because you can have multiple shapes on each other, each have a different opacity, and it will give you a very nice look and feel. So this is the fourth plugin, blobs. Use it. The fourth one, which also can transform your prototypes, which is blush. If you've ever went to a website and you've noticed these illustrations, they really give a nice look and feel on the websites. So this is similar to feather icons, but it's way more advanced because it gives you a variety of different illustrations for your website. So if you go to blush here, and it's all for free, by the way. You might find some paid packages, but mainly it's all for free. So let's say you're looking for like certain set of characters to use for the rest of your website, whether you're building, I don't know, like sports website or a corporate website, you'll always find something suitable. But if you click on this, for example, I can just simply import it. So maybe this one is more interesting. So let's just drag it there. Oops. So, because again, it's an SFG, you can simply like resize it without any problems, and it will not get pixelated at all. And as you can see, so really like you have a lot of options what to do with your designs. But to be honest, this page is looking better already, and we're not even doing anything design related. We're just placing elements from the plugins that we have. So imagine how much you can do with this plugin in terms of making the website look more advanced. So this is also the fifth plugin, and actually I have a trick with this plugin. So if you have like a floating illustration, sometimes what I personally use, like for example this illustration is doing yoga, right? You can get one of the shapes and you can like place it and you can send it to back and perhaps change the color of the box and maybe just adjust it a little bit to look like a table or something. If you have like a section below it, you can put this on the top of the section and it will look like the illustration is sitting on the section, and this is how you can get creative with your designs. So let's say this illustration, if it's sitting here, it will look quite nice on your page. So yeah, that's blush, and you can think now how you can use blobs and blush together to have this unique shape, and then use the illustration on top of the shape. This way your slider or your landing screen will look way more advanced. So yeah, that's blush. Wireframe is also one of these tools that saves a lot of time. So let's say, for example, you're building a section about the latest articles, right? And of course, you don't have data to put in your prototype, because it's just like a wireframe at the end. You just go to, so our 6-byte wireframe, yep, wireframe, it's there. And wireframe gives you a library of different wireframes that you can use for your website. So let's say you need buttons, you need like different placeholders for different stuff. There are so many wireframes that you can use, mobile wireframes, desktop wireframes that can accept images and accept different kind of elements. So if you go to web wireframes, you can see like these kind of wireframes that you can just simply import to your page. So let's look for one that is suitable. It can be anything really. But usually you use wireframes if you want to have like a placeholder for an image with a text under it and so on. I'll leave it to you to check the best ones, but all of these inside, like this one for example, like you can customize each element within the wireframe. So that's why it's not just an image, it's actually a canvas, and you can edit every single part of this wireframe. You can change the colors, you can change the images and so on. So they can act as like initial templates or skeleton for your page, which will make your work way faster. Browse it and you will be surprised by the variety of wireframes that you're gonna find. Okay, so the 7th plugin, Morph. Morph is also one of these plugins that can really transform your design. It's one of my favorites actually. And if you use it well, it will make a huge difference on your website. So let's open Morph. First of all, you will need to select an element. I'm not going to create a new element now, but let me just select any element for now. So Morph provides different kind of tools to transform the way the elements look on your website. So if you have like text and you're doing like a dark version website, you can use like the neon feature, right? The neon feature can like give this neon effect to your text, and you can change the color of the neon and stuff. So it's quite interesting. What's more interesting about Morph, if you use it with shapes, actually. So let's again, go here, plugins, morph, open morph. You can use, for example, the first option, which will provide, look at the difference between both blocks, and you can change the intensity, you can change the surface, you can even change the color. So it's really up to you how you want to work with it, but it will look very nice if you use it as a background for an image or a background for an illustration. Definitely this doesn't look very appealing, but you can get creative with it because they have a lot of options, and each option can provide a different design for your website. So this literally looks like a very nice background for let's say an illustration, right? Because if you just put an illustration there, it's a very clean design. But if you put such an element and the illustration on it, it gives this advanced design look and feel. So this is Morph. It's also very interesting. Color palettes and better font picker. I'll explain both at the same time. One of the main challenges when you're building your prototype, mainly if you don't have branding guidelines and if you're not working with a company that they have set of branding guidelines, certain colors to use, and as we discussed last time, you can save your colors to keep reusing them and not to copy the color code every single time. You can get some inspiration from color palettes. So color palettes provides you a list with certain colors that work really well together. So let's say you're building a page for a certain project and you're not sure about the branding. You don't have to worry because this provides you with a list of all of the colors that you can use and that they go well together. Because sometimes it's a huge and it's a make it or break it kind of thing. If you use different colors and they don't fit together within the website, it will break the design. So it's really simple because you can change the color, for example, of this background by simply by this button. You can change the color of this button's background by clicking on it, clicking on the color that you like. Let's say you're following the palette number 1278. I click on the red color, I copy it, and then I just paste it immediately here, and I have my color. So you don't need to go to another website to get the hex code for the color or so on. You just click on the color that you like and you change it immediately. So yeah, obviously if you want to have these colors consistent across all of your pages, you want to save them and you don't want to keep using the plugin. So this is just for inspiration. The other plugin, which is Better Font Picker. So usually you have your font on the website, but you're not sure if it's the best font for you. So Better Font Picker, it will basically detect your current font and it will give you better suggestions related to your design. So I'm not sure if they're using AI or any other kind of tool, technology, but it's a really interesting tool because it shows you the ones that fit your design the most, and it's the ones that are similar to the fonts that you're currently using. And what's really cool about it, you can just keep clicking and it will keep changing immediately, and you can see how each one of them look on your website, on your prototype. So yeah, that's one of the top advantages here. It's very visual, you can keep changing, and to be honest, I personally find some of these fonts better already for the website. So yeah, these two fonts are great. They go hand in hand and you can always use them in any project. So the last two plugins for today, we have Annotated, which is an essential plugin if you're working with a team on your prototype, especially if you're working, like one of the modules I'm doing this year is interaction design, and I'm using with my team Figma to build a prototype. So what's the best way to document the changes and give feedback on other people's designs? This is basically the ideal way to do it. There might be other plugins, but personally I like this plugin the most. So Annotated, basically you select the element that you want to leave a comment on. Once you select it, you create on-click annotation, and then you write your feedback title, feedback description, and you can even give it a color. And as you can see, it added this number here. And if you go down at the bottom of the wireframe, you'll find each element with the number and the feedback right there. So let's say I want to leave feedback right here. I can just click on add new. It added number 2. I can leave my feedback for button feedback description goes here. So, and if you scroll down, you can see also how it breaks it down. And you can create multiple frames as well. So if you want to have like separate blocks, each one of them have even like feedback or some, or to be honest, this is mainly used when you're moving your design, your prototype from this design phase to development phase. So if I want to tell the developers, when you click on this button, it has to go to this page, it has to act this way. If you're having a registration form, let's say, and you want to tell the developers what kind of characters to accept, what's the length of this input field, these kind of things, this is where you put it, basically. So yeah, it's one of these interesting plugins. And the one that saved a lot of my time, and I'm sure it will save a lot of yours, which is wireframe. So let's just make it a little bit prettier here. I'm gonna actually reuse blobs. I'm gonna insert this, and I'm gonna just place an image using Unsplash. So let's go to one of these. So let's say I want to place this one. Now, let's say you just finished your prototype and you want to publish it somewhere, or if you want to share it with whoever. Usually, how you go about that, you need to download a PSD or an AI wireframe or a mockup, and then go to Photoshop and replace the screen with your image, and it's just a long process. But with this plugin, you can just simply click on mockups, and then you need to select, of course, the entire page. So it's the landing page, which is right there. And then with a click of a button, you have a mockup for your designs, and you can download any of these images. So it still did not pick up on my last edit. If you refresh and then you do it, it will pick up. But imagine like how you can export different kind of mockups for your design and use them online. Definitely, there are some mockups that are paid, so it's a very cheap subscription if you really want to invest in this. But there are some of them that are free, and yeah, you can get creative with your mockups as well.